My name is Jim Lee, and for much of my life I have worked to preserve the legacy of America's canal era. Just as I have devoted my energies to preserving the heritage of the Morris Canal, so has the staff of the Canal Museum in Easton. They have worked to preserve the history and folk life of the Lehigh Navigation and Delaware Canal system. The story of the Lehigh Navigation and Delaware Canal system began with the discovery of vast deposits of anthracite coal in northeastern Pennsylvania. This was an abundant source of energy, if only a reliable transportation system were available. The solution was the construction of canals. The completion of the linked Lehigh Navigation-Delaware Canal system helped to spark an industrial revolution. A unique lifestyle evolved among canal workers, whose daily lives were defined by travels up and down the canal. Railroads were built, and steam trains were faster and more efficient. Unlike the canals, which were frozen in the winter, railroads could operate all year. Each year, fewer and fewer boats passed through America's canals. By 1930, only the Lehigh Navigation-Delaware Canal system remained of the more than 4,000 miles of towpath canals that had once crisscrossed a great part of this nation. The end of navigation on these waterways meant the end of the canalers' lifestyle in the Lehigh and Delaware valleys. There are still a few canal workers who remember what it was like to live and work on these waterways. And through their memories, we can glimpse a time when a boatman's world was defined by his boat, his mule team, and a narrow ribbon of water.
Well, the boating hours was 4 a.m. to 10 p.m. But if you lived late at the lock, you get up and feed your mules and brush them and carry comb them and get them harnessed. By that time they was done eating, you get them on the towpath. You started down the canal or up the canal.
We worked from 4 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, driving the mules. And we used to get on the mules, we got really tired. There's one of these levels that's 11 miles long. A little bit too much walk. We could get on and off the boat or the bridge.
We had very long hours, very long hours. We left home we would leave home by train to come to the dip. We worked out of Weisport, by the way. There was a boatyard up there. And we would take the train, early morning train, like 4:20 in the morning, and we wouldn't get home till 5:30. And sometimes when we worked 12-hour days, we didn't get home till 9 o'clock at night.
Boating, you never get enough sleep. Because when they ain't boating, you're rambling around. The young fellas. The only ones got to sleep are the old captains like that. But the young fellas, 18, 19, they want to have fun.
Getting up in the morning when I was young to get train at 5:20 was one of the toughest things. A day's work I enjoyed doing whatever I had to do on the canal. I did a varied amount of jobs too. I started out actually on a dredge boat in 1926, and I guess it was puppy love, you know what I mean? And that was a terrific job to work on that dredge boat, doing the routine thing, everything over, repeat all day long.
What is a dredge boat?
Well, a dredge boat had different types, but they kept the channel clear. They dredged the mud out of the river and out of the canal levels to keep the channel clear.
The boats was almost 100 feet long and about 10 feet high or 8 feet high and 10 feet wide. They used to call between 90 and 95 ton, but they used to give you a lot of, sometimes 100 ton, but you on the bottom, lots of times you drug on the bottom. But I don't like between 90 and 95 ton. That way you float, you didn't stick on the bottom.
That's one thing a captain had to do. Reading the code, your captain, you had to have your eyes open all the time. If you didn't, you was out of luck.
Now this looks simple along here, very easy, but there are a lot of conditions where it took some doing to handle a canal boat. here, just north of here again, between Lock 46 and Guard Lock 8, they had to switch sides from, well, here it's north and south side, from one side of the river to the other side, and that took some boating to do that, because they had to take a flying start and drift the boat across the river, which was maybe 150 to 200 yards wide, and get their mules swung across the change bridge and pick up the tow line again on the opposite side and keep on moving. And especially when the river raised up a foot or two high, that was a difficult thing to do.
Why, Pop said you had to learn to snub a boat. And that means putting a boat through the lock, a load of boat through the lock, so you don't do any damage. So we was up there with the north end of the paymaster's lock, and he said, you got to snub this boat today. And there was a lot of people there, and I was very nervous, but I made that thing out all right. I got along good. I didn't do no damage or nothing.
It's like stopping the car. You can't stop a car, just push it down. You got to do it gradually. And that's the way it is with a boat. And because the lines won't take it. You could have a good new line and not burn. I had to burn the line. That's how I learned. When I first tried to stop a boat driver, I was going to pull up on it and hold it. And that there too much to burn the line right off.
Howard, what were you blowing? How'd you use it in the canal?
I blown a shell for the lock turner to get the lock ready for a load boat or the light boat.
Could everybody blow the conch shell?
No, Pop couldn't blow the conch shell, so he used the fish horn.
The deeper the lock, the longer it took. A small lock, where it was only maybe 2 or 3 foot water, didn't take long. And not only that, but a lot of lock tenders we liked, we would even help them. A lot of them wouldn't want you to, but a lot of them would. Maybe they would open one side, we'd crank the other side for them and have our line on the mule and say, go ahead, Dan, get up. And by that time we got the gate open, why, the boat would be going out of the lock. That saved him a lot of work.
When you come up to a lock, you blowed the shell for the lock tender to get the lock ready. If you had a light boat, you lead the water out of the lock, open the lower gates, and you pull the boat in, you snub the boat into the lock. The lock tender would close the lower gates and open the wickets and the upper gates, and when it got up level with the river or canal, he'd open the upper gates and you'd hook the tow line on the mules and out you'd go.
A loaded boat would be coming down in this direction, and when an empty boat, similar to what you see up there, would be coming up, they had to pass. So there was a routine here on the Lehigh Canal, as which a regulation, which way they had to pass. There was no other choice. The loaded boat would go down on that side of the channel, and drop his line, and the mule pulling, the mules would stop, and his line would drop and sink down to the bottom. The wet line was wet, and it would sink down. And then the light boat coming up, the empty boat coming up, would come over here toward the tow path, because he was just drawing maybe about 8 to 10 inches of water, 12 inches at the most, and he could take it a passage, he could make the passage where it was shallow, see? And then he would continue pulling over top of the dropped line, and as once the boats passed one another, they were free and clear to go their own way again.
Take care of the mules. That was the main thing of boating. Take care of the mules. Because the boat wouldn't go without the mules. And if you didn't have the mules, you can't go. That's when a lot of guys didn't take care of them, feeding them and stuff and other. I always watered my mules at good places and fed them. And put the basket on. If they put it on them, they didn't eat, well, take it off. Some of them go, they didn't want it. I said, you don't want it, eh? I was going to say it, and they shake their heads, you know. They take it off. Because that's hot in the summertime, you know.
Get out and put the baskets on them and feed them. And then he'd go like ate you for 3 or 4 more hours. But you had to feed him about 6 times a day, both of them, or 3 of them, whichever we used. We always used 2 on the Lehigh and 3 on the Delaware. The bells we put on the mules at night, because that way you could tell if the mules were going up the canal or down the canal. And when they walked, the bells would ring. And when the mules were going to run away, this is what they sound like.
We dug a big hole, and he shot the mules. We skinned the mules, rolled the body in the hole, covered them up, and it was a place in Weisport where they sold the hides. See? Some would drive their mules fairly fast, others would take it a little on the easy side, some in between. And of course, it all meant the faster they moved, the more money they made by freight charges, see what I mean? They could always get back up to the plant and get another load of freight, which was coal. So some were concerned about making the buck, others maybe weren't too concerned, and they took it a little easier. There was about 4 or 5 boats laying down here. The other guy figured out how he'd get ahead of the other boats.
Hamburgers, baked beans, potatoes, fried potatoes. You always had fried potatoes and eggs for breakfast. Or always had the coffee pot on the stove, but I don't drink coffee, so that never worried me.
Howard, what'd you wear when you were working on the canal?
Pardon?
What'd you wear? What kind of clothes?
Well, you wear a pair of overalls and a pair of shirt, but mostly you went barefooted in the summertime. Only time you put shoes on was when you put the mules in the barn so they wouldn't step on your feet.
Well, that was my uncle, wife's uncle. He kept the ham always in the field with the oats, because the oats kept it. And I did too, and then I said to him one time, he come down to see me at Point Pleasant when I lay there, and I showed him the ham on the boat. I said, that's all moldy, that's no good. He said, that's good. He said, when that ham is moldy, it's keeping. You just cut the mold off and eat the other side. He said, that's the only way you keep it, by the mold keeps it.
Well, we was coming up light, and Pop was driving right down to the quarry in below Lumberville, and it was a big snapper on the towpath, so he picked him up by the tail, and they throwed him on the boat. We got up on the Lehigh. All the people laid up there, the way lock, the paymaster's lock, they all chipped in. And some bought peas, onions, vegetables, and potatoes. They cut his head off and they scalded him. They all made snapper soup. Well, I didn't eat any. I never liked snapper soup.
And the farmer had peach trees hanging over the towpath. I mean, not over the top, but a lot of times I stopped them mules and just milked them trees, no kidding. And the tomatoes be right along didn't have the fence up. And oh hell, we get our pockets full and what the heck? And they didn't seem to care. But peaches or apples, boy, and we just milk them off them trees. Stop the team and just keep milking like that. Maybe not many done it, but I think pretty everybody done it.
Oh yeah, they had bed bugs. They come from lumber. You get bed bugs from lumber. And there was a man that boated on the canal, and I won't mention no names because he used to say, you have bed bugs? And you said no. Well, he gathered bed bugs. He had bed bugs. He'd drop down your stovepipe hole. And next time he'd see you, he'd ask you if you had bed bugs. And if you said no, he'd say, you're a damn liar. I know you got some.
The boats that run here from Mock Chunk to Bristol. When they got into Bristol, they had to change their equipment and leave that boat there, the loaded one, and come back up with a light one and get them again. It had a mess. When I stayed with my brother, that one trip, put your hand in there, I shouldn't say that, put your hand in there and smell it. Bed bugs, you couldn't get rid of them.
We never got in the house. We changed our clothes out in the field, and Mom had a tub of scalding water, put the clothes in the water. Never got in the house till after you changed your clothes.
Generally, they were pretty decent boatmen. There's only, I would say, about 3 fellows out of the 40 that I knew that you could say they were in the wrong place. They ought to have been doing something other than boating.
But a lot of them boatmen, some was nice, and some was outlaw. That was the only trouble boating. If you wasn't tough, you couldn't get along. No.
I say it's a beer joint someplace near. Some of them captains, they get pretty well lit up. No kidding. There'd be fights too. But it'd be nothing but boating all the time, boating. I'd be all here boat. That's all we know, see? We didn't meet nobody else. On a Sunday, we just meet the people that's on the canal.
I did know a few that maybe drank a bit heavy, but they were always capable of doing their work. One of them in particular I remember was Happy Joe Zangley, who worked out, his home base was Bethlehem. Now he was a fairly heavy drinker, but he was always capable of doing his job. He was a boatman, by the way.
The boatman up there didn't like him up there because he was the only colored man. And they said they throwed him overboard and tried to drown him with a pole. That's what I heard. And Harry Lickletter, he's dead and going, and he said he went up and told his pop and John Free, and they saved Jimmy's life.
How'd they save his life?
They pulled him out of the canal.
Did they have to fight the drunks to do it?
They fought all the drunks, and they said that they knocked them down and they laying like corn cobs on a pile.
I like Bill Lickletter. He was nice. I like them all of the Lickletters, but Bill, I don't know how he took to me. He took up from me one time. Some guys got tough. He said, "You ain't getting tough. That man ain't bound you." And said, "What the hell you bound him for?" He said, "Get out." And then in the wintertime, we always parked together. I knew where he stopped at Bridgeton. And I lived on my boat. I wasn't married then, you know, single. I lived on there to the bottom going home to Bristol. I like to live on them boats. It was nice. And he used to cook. He's a great man to cook. I hear him knock on the door on my cabin top. And I said, "What the heck is that?" I go up, open the door, open the thing, and look. There's the boy, his boy sent over buckwheat cakes and sausage. I said, "Oh my God." Said, "My father said you eat these." I said, "Oh, I had them." He was a good fellow, Bill Lickletter.
One Sunday we laid at New Hope, and it was Nye Miller. He liked his alcohol, and he wanted to know if I would buy his team. He wanted more money to buy alcohol. And I said, "Yeah, I'll buy him. How much you want for him?" He says, "You give me $10, and you buy the team and the rig." I said, "Yeah, tomorrow when you sober up, you'll want your $10 back in your team." So I watered these mules and fed them for him, but I didn't buy them.
They thought it was just a dog's job, some of the people, see? They thought it was just a scum. That's what a lot of them thought. Okay. The nearest I can put it to you. They'd call you names, and like there, Catasauqua Way, there's a bridge, I think it's a Central Railroad bridge goes across the canal, a foot of Sports' name. And the swimmers that get on there, they jump on your boat, some are naked, some had wives on. And I think one fella shot one fella. I think it was Joni White. Now, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. But somebody shot one of them guys, and I put the kibosh to him by getting on the boats. But that don't keep them off. You get on the damn bridge and throw a rock down on you.
Well, on that short level at Allentown, after you come out of the river at Allentown, at the foot of the Allentown Dam, there's only a short level there, maybe half a mile or a quarter of a mile, and you go down there loaded. I never seen so many swimmers, and they used to get on the boat and they'd sink you right down on the bottom, but they'd never come up on deck. So you used to holler woo, the mules would stop, and they'd dive off and on, and pretty soon you'd say to them, "Okay, you had your fun," and they'd say, "Okay, Captain." They'd all jump off the boat and float and start the mules out again.
They used to call me all kind of names.
Did they? What?
Well, Canal, you rusty Canal, here comes this and that. Then I put up with a guy named Coffee, and they said, "He had a big Airedale dog." They say, "Hey, we didn't see the dog. Did you roast him or what?" Stuff like that, you know. You'd be in school and they'd tell you that stuff.
Would they?
And If I could lick the guy, I'd punch him in the snoot. If I couldn't lick him, I had to walk away from him.
Them Swope boys, they were some boys. I met them, you know. Well, I know the old man, but I never knowed the boys could. Lots of time I met them, they was busy with the muse and different things, you know. And you didn't have time to bother them. So I was up there, and I know the old man good, father. And Howard put him on his father to me. And so I was sitting there talking to other boatmen. They come up to said, my father said to take you take me over the river to get some, well, I said, it's all right if he said so, because I wasn't going to take him and something would happen to him, one of them fall overboard, and I couldn't get him, or I wouldn't have seen him when he did, couldn't get him, and drowned, you know. And I said, I'll take you if you do right, do as I say, and then you'll be all right. Went over there and went to the other side with a rowboat, you know. And they got in and went over and went to the store. And they bought their candy and stuff they wanted. And I paid for it for them because I had money at that time. And I didn't know how much money they had. And so I took them and got the candy, come back. But they weren't like some boys. Some boys just take the store all around. But they just stayed together, you know. They had to hunt them, because strange place. I was never there before. And they come back and went to the father. He was happy.
We wanted to go across the river on a rowboat to get some ice cream, and Pop, he wouldn't let us go. Yet we could swim. He said, you can't go, because I ain't going to let you go. And Jimmy was up there, and Jimmy said, well, Frank, I'll be all right if I take the boys over. And they said, well, if you want to take them over, you take them. And Jimmy bought the ice cream. We came home with our money in our pocket.
I was pulling myself up and down on the hatches. And he said, don't do that, because the first thing you know, you're going to be overboard. The first thing I knew, I was overboard. And I was drowning. And I see him coming towards me. And I grabbed him by the hair. He took me ashore, put me on the boat. I cried quite a lot.
I got kicked one time downtown. Well, the harness come loose, and I was fixing. He wasn't kicking at me. He was kicking for the oyster, the flies and stuff, you know. And kicked me, and overboard I went. So the only way I got out of there, because I couldn't swim good, I seen the tow line back of them, you know, floating. And the tow line, till they get good and wet, they sink. And that was floating. I grabbed the tow line and hollered, get up to them, and they went on and pulled me out of the water.
At Pete Agnew's lock, he had a store there. And I got 10 loaves of bread. And I trained down the tow paths with it on my back. And when I crossed the fall, it used to be a fall gate. When I crossed the fall gate, I reached for the handle on the other side, I fell in the lock with the 10 loaves of bread. And it was cold, too. And the owner, Mrs. Owner, see me, and she came running out, and she put the pole down to hold me, but I could swim. I wasn't going to drown. And she said, oh, my God, the bread. I said, don't worry about the bread. Get me out of here. So she goes. She had another woman there. So her name was Edward Sterling. So they had the pole there, and they filled the lock to get me out.
You was out under these big trees where the canal goes, and boy, this lightning was cracking, and oh boy, the mules was getting all shooked up, and you didn't know whether a tree was going to fall on you or you was going to get killed. That's when you minded it, when there was a real bad thunderstorm in the summer.
Pop always said when it's thundering and lightning and it's raining, stay away from the mules, because the body and the temperature and the shoes they wore draw the lightning.
One time I was going towards Bristol, and there was another thunderstorm, and it knocked a tree down right in front of me. I'm never afraid of lightning, but after that, I was. Captain James H. Brown lived in this town for a good many years. This is Point Pleasant, Pennsylvania. I lost track of Jimmy when I quit boating, but then I found him again. I came down and there's the post office here and got hunting license. I came out with a handful of papers,
And I went across the street, and I asked him, "This is Captain James H. Brown?" And he said, "Yes." So Jimmy held his hands up. He said, "Yes, yes." He said, "Aye, Captain Brown." Well, I said, "According to these papers, you're going to go to jail." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Well, you're a bad actor." And some of his friends there was about ready to throw me in the creek. So I told him who I was, and Jimmy jumped down on the porch and gave me a big hug. We've been friends ever since.
I traveled the canal while I was a youngster, even though I wasn't employed, but I traveled on the canal boats, and it just got in my blood, I guess.
Yeah, I missed the canal because I was used to it. I boated 6 years, and I missed it. But I didn't forget about the canal.
I never thought that I'd ever miss boating, but I did.
I used to love it because I'd sooner do that than get a job. Farmers wanted boys that time to work, see? Farmers and, pick potatoes and that stuff. But this was my happiness.
You had a tough time to get them off the canal, I'll put it that way. Yes, sir, they stayed there. They were a canaler from day one. And that was pretty general, too. Everybody liked their work.
That's how they told me. I had a lot of flags on my dasher. Trey said you call it dasher. You stick down a coal, and then you put. I had that many flags on, and they only flags that low high, and they would flee and flow and flee, and you could say, "Here comes Jimmy Brown." They could tell Jimmy Brown to come.
This was our music on the canal. We all, I guess, learned to play it a little bit.